just to put that out there. I mean, if the committee's content to go to sites, but I wanted to note that the committee's already been there.
Convener. I can't remember.
Okay, just to clarify, we have Provost Bishop has requested a site visit. I'm happy to support it. How does other members feel then? Is there anybody otherwise minded? We agreed that? Okay. Right, so that's sites for 5 and now sites for 7. Any other site requests at this stage? If not, I'll come in and state quite clearly that I would like to go to sites to item 4, which is installation of telecommunications apparatus, including monopole associated cabinets at site the south of Kirtley Marison Road, Brightons. I think there's a general concern there, and I would like to see the locus for myself. So I'm formally moving item 4 for sites.
I'll happily second that, Convener.
Anybody otherwise minded? I'm going to the screen.
Hello?
Who's speaking?
It's Councillor
Yes.
Redmond. I was just going to say, I think there's a deputation in for that today, so before we go on to site, it might be good to hear what the people's concerns are regarding it. So I would move that we hear the deputation to hear their concerns before we go on to site and see it. But it's up to you. I don't know if anyone wants to second that.
Well, what Councillor Redmond says, he said that there's a deputation here in relation to this application, and he believes that we should hear the deputation first before we go to sites. But I'm still maintaining that we go to sites first, so there'll be an opportunity for the deputation to come back, and also it gives an opportunity to the committee to have a look, and then they'll be better versed if it does come back in relation to anything that's coming forward for any representation. So I'm formally moving sites. Is there any?
Provost, I would support Councillor Redmond. If we have members of the public who have actually turned up here this morning expecting to be heard, I think it's only right that we should listen to them.
Okay then, so I'm formally moving sites. I've got a seconder. We've got, are you putting forward an amendment, Councillor Redmond, that we hear the deputation first?
Yeah, I'll put forward that as an amendment, thanks.
Right. Okay, I'm just going to seek clarification for our legal advisor, Mr. Moody, on this one.
Yes, thank you, Convener. It's not the normal practice of the committee to do that. The normal practice is to, if it's agreed to go to sites and then consider the application at its next meeting. But the decision is a procedural one, and it's the procedure can be determined by the committee itself. So if the committee prefers, in this case, to do that, then it's a decision which is open to it.
Councillor Murtagh.
Thanks, Convener. I also have sympathy with what Councillor Redmond said, backed up by Councillor Nimmo, and I often feel that, indeed, I often feel that actually it'd be beneficial to hear the officer's report or a summary of it prior to going to site. But I take the point in deputations, and I'm glad you sought legal guidance. I suppose my only concern is that is generally how I feel about not just planning applications, but on other occasions when we've had deputations and potentially they get continued. But it's whether that sets a precedent, or, I mean, I know we take each thing on its merits, but I think the difficulty is that we quite often find ourselves in this situation, and we could have circumstances where, you know, if there are other deputations, I don't know they're there today, that are then not being heard, but we hear one. So I suppose it's just something for the committee to consider. That I think that's the only difficulty, is having that situation where if we hear one, we really should be hearing them all.
Thank you for your input. Just to clarify the situation again, I wonder if we could maybe find out if we can turn the sound up a bit, because it's finding it difficult to hear members. Pardon?
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but it's just on the sound, just while you're saying, if you're struggling to hear us, I'm struggling. It's just with your microphone, and it's kind of buzzy and tinny. I haven't checked what it's like online for YouTube or whatever, but it's quite. Everybody else in the room seems okay. So I don't know if it's just your mic or if it's moving it slightly away. But it's quite. It's like got a bit of a buzzy echo on it. So I don't know. Is it just my mic though that is struggling, or is everybody online? Are you struggling to hear?
Convener, maybe just to confirm for Councillor Marta, it's everyone. So I think the people in the room were struggling to hear Councillor Redmond. I think Gemma's tried to turn up the sound as best she can. We'll see what we can do about that, but we have noticed the issue.
Okay, can everybody that's on remote, can they hear me okay? Everybody hear me okay? That's fine. So just to clarify where we are, we've a motion to go to sites moved by myself, and I think it was seconded by the Provost. We now have an amendment by Councillor Redmond, and I believe that are you seconding Councillor Redmond, Councillor Nimmo?
I'm happy to second them, Convener. Yeah.
So we have a motion moved and seconded, we have an amendment moved and seconded. Before we go to the vote, is there anybody else like to come into this debate at this stage? Yeah. Councillor Sinclair.
Convener, thank you for your indulgence here. There's been site visits moved for several of the applications that's on the report today. It's on the agenda today. This amendment has only come in following the members of the public leaving, who I believe were due and scheduled to be giving a deputation request. I wonder if, in the interests of parity for others who have come here today, and I appreciate that members of the public are coming here to give over their specific concerns and address the committee, as is their right. However, I wonder if in the interest of parity, the committee wants to consider that people who were due to give a deputation have already left, and therefore that opportunity for them is now gone.
Thank you for that. Okay, then, if there's nobody else like to come into the debate, we'll go back to Mr. Moody for the vote. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Convener. And as you've said, you have moved for a site visit in relation to item 4. You've been seconded by Provost Bissett. As an amendment, Councillor Redmond moves that the deputation be heard before any site visit, and that has been seconded by Councillor Nimmo. Provost Bissett.
Sites.
Councillor Bowes. I don't believe Councillor Bowes has joined the meeting yet. Bailey Buchanan.
Motion.
And just maybe to confirm, the motion is to go to sites. The amendment is to hear the deputation before going to sites. Councillor Colley.
Motion.
Councillor Flynn.
Motion.
Councillor Forrest.
Motion.
Councillor Kelly.
Motion.
Bailey Kerr. Councillor Marta.
Motion.
Councillor Nimmo.
Amendment.
Councillor Redmond.
Amendment.
And Councillor Sinclair.
Motion.
There are 9 votes for the motion. There are 2 votes for the amendment. The motion is carried and the decision is to go to sites.
Okay, this take an opportunity now just to clarify exactly where we are. We have item 4, sites. Just to clarify this, we have item 5, sites. And we have item 7, sites. Have we all got that clarified? Okay, right, thank you very much for that. That takes us to item 6 on your agenda this morning, which is construction of number 2 dwelling houses and associated infrastructure at land to the east of 1 Hillcrest Square, Reading Muirhead, for Mr David Gallagher. It's pages 40 to 51 on your agenda papers, and the report is by our officer, Julie Seidel-Gregory. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you, Convener. Whilst I'm presenting this case, please can we view the drawings and photographs if possible? Thank you. This application relates to the construction of 2 detached dwelling houses at land to the south east of Hillcrest Square in Reading Muirhead. The proposed houses are 2-storey detached and are designed to reflect the 2 houses currently under construction by the same applicant to the north of this application site. The plots front the access to Hillcrest Square at its junction with the B810 Shield Hill Road. This planning application relates to a site which currently benefits from planning permission P200628 full for 1 house. The application was granted by the Planning Committee and remains extant until November 2025. The consultation responses are summarised in section 4 of your report. No issues are arising which cannot be dealt with by planning condition or conclusion of a suitable legal agreement. No representations were received as detailed in section number 6 of your report. The application is referred to the Planning Committee for determination today as it is assessed as being contrary to the development plan. This is similar to other individual plots at the application site and surrounding land to the north and the west, which some members may recall coming before committee previously. This plot is no longer within the urban limit or an identified housing opportunity as shown in the current adopted local development plan spatial strategy. However, planning permission is extant for the site. This means that the site can be developed, albeit with a single much larger house, and therefore the principle of the development of the site is established. The planning history of this site adds weight to the principle of development as presented today, and it's considered that there would be no merit in refusing planning permission, given that there is planning permission which would allow the development of the site for residential purposes. Further, it is noted that this development is by the same developer as the 2 plots to the north of the site, which would result in a similar architectural treatment and a uniform appearance on completion of this plot. It is therefore recommended that the committee agree that it is minded to grant planning permission. This is subject to conclusion of a legal agreement in relation to open space and education, and thereafter conditions which are detailed at section 9 of your report. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you very much for that report. Thank you. I'll open it up to members. Councillor Kerr.
Sorry, I'm not hearing Councillor Kerr.
No, still not getting anything, Convener, either.
Hear me now?
I can hear you now, thank you.
I mean, I know the site. Just one question. Since the 2 houses who are under construction that looks well, they are getting service for the road going into Hillcrest. How will these 2 dwellings get serviced regarding a road, and where will it come in from? The same road in Hillcrest? Julie?
Thank you. If we could perhaps show the proposed block plan for this, it should be with other drawings if that's at all possible. These 2 plots would also be accessed off the same road that serves Hillcrest Square. There would be a single access point, a shared driveway point, with parking to the front of both of those properties. If at all possible, hopefully we can see that block plan, and then you'll have absolute clarity in terms of what's proposed here.
Well, aye.
Unfortunately, I don't. It looks like there might be an issue in showing that plan, but certainly I can
No,
confirm
Julie,
that
Julie,
the access
Julie,
is from Hillcrest Road.
Gemma was away fixing something else. She's got to put it up now.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Julie, could you just clarify in the folder what file you're referring to?
There should be a drawing called proposed block plan. Just bear with me a second.
Yep, I've got it. Julie, I've got it.
Got it. That's fantastic. Okay, if you just scroll down slightly, Gemma, if possible. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see that. You can see the junction coming into Hillcrest Square and the two plots 3 and 4, which would in effect finish the row of houses that are currently under construction. You should be able to see that it's a single access point of Hillcrest Square rather than 2 individual driveways. That was requested for road safety purposes to pull any access away from that junction to ensure that there's a safe manoeuvre for any vehicles coming in and also for pedestrians. And then it's that single access point that would lead into driveway, and then you should be able to see 3 parking spaces for each property.
Thanks, Julie. Just one final question, convener. Probably for Gary for roads. I know Julie's saying that it was requested, but is roads happy with the distance between the junction and the driveway?
Well, can maybe bring our roads officer in. Craig there at the moment.
Yeah. Thanks, convener.
Thank you.
Through you, convener. Yeah,
That's
Councillor
great.
Kerr, as Julie said, we actually asked for a couple of alterations to this. The initial proposal for plot 4, the access arrangement was much closer to the junction of Hillcrest Road and the B810. We were quite concerned that a vehicle exiting the driveway wouldn't be able to approach that junction and arrange itself correctly without blocking the incoming lane off the B810. So we asked for an alteration to be made to move that driveway access slightly further away from the B810, which is why we've got this shared arrangement now.
Thanks, Craig. With that, convener, I'm quite happy to propose that we support the officer's recommendation.
I'm happy to second it, and just to say to the committee at this stage that we've been joined at this present time by Councillor Bowes. The fact is that Councillor Bowes, because it would be taking no part in the decision making on this item because it hasn't been fully aware the representation has been made both by officers and members, so he appreciates that. Okay, and we've just been joined by Councillor Redmond, but Councillor Redmond, have you been listening in to...
I was on.
You were on?
So it's-
Okay, so I'll just clarify with Mr Moody that it's okay for you to take part in this decision making.
See, I didn't know the point at which Councillor Redmond left the call, and I suppose the question is, convener, whether Councillor Redmond has been able to hear all the contributions during this particular item.
I'm up the stair there, so.
Yeah, I think if it's not a material gap, then there isn't a difficulty.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Nimmo, then Councillor Murtagh.
Well, convener, I think Councillor Murtagh was first. She's number 1 on the screen. I'm number 2, so I'll give way to her.
Okay, I'm glad you know your place, Councillor Nimmo. Councillor Murtagh.
I'm going to have a quote there about Councillor Nimmo saying that I'm number 1, just for all eternity, so I can play it back. Thanks for that. It was very kind of you, Councillor Nimmo. I suppose I would have actually jumped in and seconded this also, and I think it's probably a good opportunity to just highlight, as what Julie was outlining there, that when we have a situation where we have extant permission, and that if we were considering something afresh, we might not grant something. I think in this particular instance, it's not such a big issue, but we do have and have had plenty of situations where we have had, and I can think of one recently, where perhaps you might not want to be looking at a recommendation to grant permission, but where, because we have extant permission and a plot started, that it would indeed continue. And what we're really looking at is whether what's there is better than what is already got permission for. I think probably in my mind it is an improvement, but obviously there's always that situation where you have the risk of an unfinished plot as well, should you not look at changing for an application. So I think I'm happy that this is an improvement, and I think that with the changes to the vehicle access, that's sensible. So I'm happy to go with that. But it's one of those where I think I'd love personally to see a change in the legal frameworks, which kind of tightens up some of the issues around this. And I wanted to take that opportunity to highlight the issue in planning generally. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor, for your input. Councillor Nimmo.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. It's just a general point in relation to 5.1 on page 42. It states that the Redmuirhead and Wollaston Community Council didn't make any comment. Can it just be confirmed when they were actually advised of the application? Because there seems to be a bit of a theme running through a number of applications this morning where community councils haven't provided any representation at all. It would help in the future if we could get a date added to this section as to when community councils were actually consulted.
Thank you for that, Councillor Nimmo. I'll pass you on to Mr Dryden.
Thank you, Convener, and Councillor Nimmo. Yes, it's a valid question that you're raising. Community councils are consulted by virtue of the weekly list of planning applications that, once they're received, they're circulated, that you'll be familiar with. They're accessible on our web pages, and that is a protocol where community councils are consulted, and then the onus is on them to decide whether they wish to obviously make comment or not. But certainly it's something we could look at, particularly, as I say, it's on the weekly list, and that's something we could consider for future reports.
Okay, thanks for that. Thanks, Convener.
Okay, thank you. Okay, just to clarify where we are, we've got a motion moved and seconded to agree the recommendations contained within the report. Is anybody otherwise minded? Are we all agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed, thank you. Councillor Bowes, just to let you know that in terms of, before you had joined us, that members of the committee have agreed that item 4, item 5 and item 7 will all be going in site visits, so you can just take a note in your agenda papers. Yep. Double that, yep. Okay, no, we appreciate that. So that's 4, 5 and 7 in sites. So we've just finished item 6, item 7 sites. So we're now going to item 8, which construction of outbuilding retrospective at 4 Hollandbush Crescent, Bank Knock, Bonnybridge for Mrs. Karen Owens. There's a deputation request in relation to Councillor McCabe to be received as a deputation. So first of all, are we going to agree to the deputation, Queen Herd?
Agreed, I'm happy with that.
Happy with that, everybody? That's fine. Okay, then the report is by our officer, Brent Vivian. Thank you, Brent.
Thank you, Convener. GMO, can I just ask that you have the drawings and the photographs on standby, ready to show? This application seeks retrospective planning permission for the construction of an outbuilding within the rear garden area. Gemma, if you could bring up the composite plan, please, and zoom in on the proposed site plan, if possible. So if you can scroll down. Yeah, it's actually, yeah, it's the one on the left-hand side. If you could just zoom in on that plan. To the left, it's the proposed site plan. It's called, not the elevations. It's further to the left. So the drawing on the left hand, that's it on the left hand side there. shows the outbuilding within the rear garden space. It's 7.3 meters long and 3.1 meters wide and 0.45 meters from the side boundary and a similar distance off the rear boundary at the nearest point. Jimmy, can I just ask you to work through the photographs now, starting with the first one's called front elevation ×2. So this shows the front of the outbuilding. As you can see, it's flat roofed. The height is 2.93 meters. The doors you can see lead to a sitting area within the building and the TV room. And you can see a gap at the right hand end of the building that houses some gym equipment. Next photo, please, Gemma. So this is looking back towards the house. As you can see, it's a 2-story dwelling house. Next, please. This is looking at the property from the front. You can just pick up the site of the shed, the outbuilding, and you can see along the fence line on the neighbouring property there's a existing shed at a lower height. Next, thanks, Gemma. That's just another view of the front of the shed within the garden setting. I think there might be one more, Gemma, and that's probably it. Right, we've seen that one. That's actually, it's probably enough. I think we've got a decent feel for the characteristics of the site. So I'll move on to the report. There's no planning history recorded for the application site. There were no consultations carried out for this application, and no public representations have been received during consideration of the application. Section 7A of your report assesses the application against the development plan. In summary, the development is not considered to have a detrimental impact on the character or environmental quality of the home or the surrounding area in terms of size, design, and materials. While it is relatively large for the size of the garden, it is not considered to be over-dominant in the setting. It is clearly smaller in scale and subservient to the house, and is complementary to the functioning of the garden ground. It is also not considered to have a detrimental effect on the neighbouring properties in terms of physical impact, overshadowing or overlooking. The material planning consideration is the Council's supplementary guidance for residential extensions and alterations. The development is considered acceptable having regard to this guidance. In conclusion, the application is considered to accord with the development plan, and it is therefore recommended for approval. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Brent. Could I say at this stage I was delighted to see the quality of the photographs there. I think it's been very, very beneficial. It's now an opportunity for the deputation request that was granted for Councillor McCabe. If Councillor McCabe would like to step forward. Thank you, Councillor McCabe. Just to clarify, obviously you know the situation. You have 10 minutes. Once you finish your presentation, then there will be an opportunity for members to ask any questions. So you have 10 minutes starting from now. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Convener. As Councillor Burns already alluded to, there was a couple of accidents on the motorway. That's why I've just arrived very timorously, just as this agenda item was coming up. If I can speak to this one, why was it called in? It's called in because I have concerns about the actual process. I don't have a concern particularly with this application. It's is it minded for grant? I believe it is. I'm not going to object to that. My question really is, why wasn't this handled under permitted development rights? If you have a look at the planning application form, you'll see that the builder, it's a quote from the applicant, that the builder gave us wrong information and was adamant permission was not required. Now, obviously, an applicant should not rely on a builder. You get some good builders, reputable builders, but you also get some, as they're known in the trade, cowboy builders. I don't suggest either situation is here, but at face value, it looks as if the applicant had been given some advice from a builder in being adamant that permission was not required. This then led to me saying, well, how has that happened? You know, and it comes down to this question of, is a planning application, a full planning application required, or could it have been covered under permitted development rights? I believe in this situation it could probably have been considered under permitted development rights. And really, the reason for me calling it in here today was to try and find the reason why it wasn't considered under permitted development rights, or the reason why it had to be a full planning application. So it's actually the process that I'm questioning on this one, Convener. I don't have any, I mean, as you quite correctly says, you know, the presentation from the officers was excellent, and photographs gives everybody the idea that this is a good development. I don't have a problem with it at all. My question is, why are we going through the process of a full planning application when realistically, this is the whole reason permitted development rights was introduced, if you like, to take care of these, what I would consider a relatively minor application through a simpler process. Instead, we managed to make it fall under the remit of the full planning process. That's basically it, Convener. As I say, I don't have an objection at all. I think it's a good development.
Brent, I'm going to bring you back in. You've heard Councillor McCabe simplified exactly why he's brought this forward, the question in relation to permitted development. I think that, well, most members will realise, or have heard, that the Scottish Government at the moment is looking at the possibility of making significant changes in permitted development, and hopefully that will ensure that it's going to be a lot simpler and a lot easier for everybody, including officers and members. But we're here now. Councillor McCabe has called this in. He's gave the reasons why he's called it in. He's no objecting. He's stated that. So it's in relation to, back to you, Brent, to give us an explanation in relation to the permitted development and the reason why it's had to come to committee. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I can clarify. Permitted development rights will apply if certain criteria are met. Where the criteria aren't met, then planning permission is required. In this case, not all of the relevant criteria were actually met. For an outbuilding, you're allowed to build up to a height of 2.5 metres within 1 metre of the boundary. The height of this structure within 1 metre of the boundary is 2.93 metres, so it exceeds the 2.5 metre criteria. The other issue is in relation to site coverage. The building's obviously quite large, taking into account the coverage from the outbuilding. The 50% site coverage allowance within the rear garden ground is slightly exceeded, so that it's on the basis of those two criteria that planning permission was required.
Okay, thank you for that. An opportunity now for members of the committee to ask any questions to Councillor McCabe at this stage. No questions to Councillor McCabe? None? Okay then, Councillor McCabe, you can retake your seat, sir. Thank you very much.
I wonder if I could just make a wee, I was delighted to hear you say, Convener, that as far as you understand, the Scottish Government is looking at potentially permitted development rights, maybe looking to hone it in a wee bit. That's really all I'm after today. You know, I'm delighted to that. And thank you to Brent for explaining both reasons why it was not deemed under permitted development rights. I totally respect that, and I can now fully understand why it came under the full planning regime. Thank you, Convener.
No, thank you, Councillor McCabe. Have we just retake your seat, sir? No, I think you should just retake your seat. This is the proper process. Thank you. Yeah. Councillor Murtagh? Can you hear me, Councillor Murtagh?
I can. I was just flagging for the next part of the process if we've got to that point. I don't know if we haven't yet or not.
Yes, but that's it. Councillor McCabe is retaking his seat. There's now an opportunity for a general debate on the issue. Thank you.
Okay, if I'm first, I mean, I'm happy to move Grant on this, and I think, as Brent explained, it was because of particularly in this instance, because of the height, it didn't come under permitted development. I would say I have sympathy with what Councillor McCabe is trying to illustrate, and obviously brought this issue to executive yesterday. I suppose I'd just like to say, I think on this instance, though, because it's sort of retrospective, it's maybe not such a huge issue, but given cost of planning application is an issue in time, etc., I think it's clear that on this instance, this has elongated the process and probably cost us more in this application coming to the committee. In my view, it was probably unnecessary for this one. So I just think that we have to be mindful of that, and well, maybe others will object to it, I don't know, but in my mind, I think those questions in this instance could have been answered offline, and it's perhaps the call-in process itself is where we have that input to say whether it should come to committee as the check or not on this application, and I think it's probably a bit regrettable that it is here, to be honest, but I'm happy to move Grant. Thank you.
I'm happy to second you at this stage. So we'll have a motion moved and seconded to agree the recommendation contained within the report. Is there Councillor Redmond?
Not otherwise minded, but I think was a bit useful in Councillor McCabe bringing this forward today. You know, we've got a lot of people looking to build garden rooms in their garden, and working as a joiner myself, I've built a few, and they're probably bigger than that. And you know, people said, "Well, do you need planning permission?" And before I was a councillor, the answer was probably, "Well, not if your neighbours don't complain." That's what you need. So it maybe would be good to look at, because I've googled it on the council side and I couldn't find it, but the Scottish Government's got a few bullet points of the sort of rules that Brent outlined. But do we maybe need to look at that a wee bit going forward, offering clear guidance on the council side to what is permitted garden room development, right, and what is pushing the boundaries, and maybe need planning permission just to help people as they're building these. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. We'll go to Mr. Dryden.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. I think some of the points been raised there by Councillor Butter and Councillor Redmond and Councillor McCabe are relevant. I think clearly the planning system is in a position of change, obviously with the new planning bill. And as you've heard this morning, there is likely to be further changes. There already have been some changes to permitted development, but as you say, you have your planning team here, experienced officers who deal with that and are on hand, particularly for yourselves as elected members, not just on the planning committee, but to your general constituents. And again, we would encourage that if members see the weekly recommendation list, and if you have any queries, officers would be happy to answer those queries to allow you to decide whether you think it's relevant to call it in or not. But I think the point you're making about information, we're always being aware of
changes, and where we can on our web pages, we will update our web pages accordingly. As a currently movable feast, but certainly it's a valid point, and it's something we'll continue to do. That we will, where we can, make guidance more appropriate. We have a lot of supplementary guidance already on our web pages through our local development plan too, but also on our development management web pages, we will actually provide appropriate updated guidance where we can. That is work in progress, but I do take the point that obviously the understanding permitted development can be at times, maybe if you're not familiar with it, but I would reassure that officers are experienced and familiar with it. So I would just reiterate here that, again, moving forward, we are certainly open to members contacting us, maybe during the application, just to clarify, if there's any queries such as that, we can hopefully provide that evidence, and we reassure you. And as Councillor Murtagh said, potentially it might not necessitate then an application coming to the planning committee where it can be dealt with under delegated powers. Thank you.
Thanks, that's it.
Okay, thanks for your input, Councillor Redmond. Okay, just to clarify where we are.
Convener, just before, just a quick one. I don't want to dwell on it, but it was brought up yesterday, executive by Councillor McCabe, where, as Councillor Redmond says, that if that information's on the website, we now charge applicants for advice. So people are sceptical, or not sceptical, but money's tight, and try to go and ask for advice. It's costing them now, but if the information was already there, and the guidance was there, that maybe help people. Thanks.
Sinclair.
Thanks, Convener. It was just to kind of back up Councillor Redmond's comments. I think a very quick Google on here has shown me that the Scottish Government has some pretty in-depth, not just bullet points, but pretty in-depth information about what is permitted development and what isn't. So it's quite easily publicly searchable. And I just wondered if planning officers, and I wouldn't want to add more to planning officers' workload than is currently on top of them, but is there benefit in members of the public who are wishing to perhaps submit an application in contacting the planning department first before application? Is there a process available for people to ask a question before putting an application in?
Yes, there is that provision, but as been mentioned, clearly we are now introduced through discretionary powers, which I would add, I think most, if not all, planning authorities are now introducing, so we're not unique there. We've actually we've been one of the authorities that have been maybe late to that table. We have obviously appreciated what's been raised this morning about costs. We are mindful of that, but we have to find that balance with the service that we provide, the resources that we have, and the time, because some of these inquiries are almost tantamount to a planning application assessment. So therefore it's important that we recognise and we obviously use that power. But it's something we reluctantly brought in, but in the challenging climate we're in. And I think the point you've raised, Councillor Sinclair, is there is certainly evidence on the web pages, and also when we do get such inquiries, we will write back to advise that we can't give you a formal response unless you apply as a pre-application charge or a formal determination. But what we do is provide links to our pages and also links to the Scottish Government advice. So we do try and direct and signpost prospective applicants, prospective developers, of where they can seek that advice if they don't want to formally pay a charge to seek formal pre-application advice.
Thanks. Yeah, and in that case, I suppose the point would be that it would be up to individual applicants who are discussing these issues with their contractor to look up and have the mind to look up that information and not rely on perhaps misinformation coming forward from anybody who might want to give them that. And I suppose it's probably a lesson for us all to ensure that we are reading up on everything that we're doing and being 100% of the way of the facts before we go into anything like that. And that would perhaps stop something like this coming to this committee where there may be a bit of it may be a bit unclear. Thanks, Convener.
For your input, sir. Is there anybody else like? We'll just clarify once again. We'll have a motion moved by Councillor Murtagh, seconded by myself, to agree the recommendations contained within your agenda papers and the report. Is there anybody otherwise minded?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you. Just to say again, Brent, we're delighted with the quality of those photographs, and you've got a lot to keep up now in future meetings. Thank you, sir.
Sorry, we're not hearing Councillor Boyce online, or at least I'm not. I can see him talking.
Councillor Boyce, thank you, sir. We'll let you leave the room then before we introduce. Okay, that was a very good debate. I think we learned quite a bit in that last item. I'm sure there'll be a lot more coming out in relation to this permitted development situation. That takes us to item 9 on your agenda papers this morning. It's construction of outbuilding at 51 Pretoria Road, Larbert, for Miss Liz Graham. It's pages 72 to 80 on your agenda, and we have a deputation request made by Councillor McCabe, so we'll go to the vote in relation to that. Have we agreed to hear Councillor McCabe?
Agreed.
Agreed? Everybody good? That's fine then, that's perfect. Our officer for this report this morning is Ryan McDonough. Thank you, Ryan.
Hi, Convener. Yes, it's me, Ryan McDonough, who is the case officer for this application, and I'm happy to take you through the report. I would ask that if Gemma is able to share the relevant location plan, first of all. Thanks, Gemma. So as can be seen here, the application site is located within the rear garden of a 2-storey block of flatted dwellings on Pretoria Road in Larbert. So this detailed application seeks planning permission for the construction of an outbuilding in the form of a garden shed. The proposed development would measure 3.1 metres by 2.6 metres and be a total height of 2.2 metres. Gemma, can you just share the relevant site photograph just now? It's photo number 2. Thanks, Gemma. So as you can see just now, there is existing outbuilding within the block of flats. However, these can be clearly seen from aerial imagery dating back to approximately 2004. This image shows a context for where the proposed development, i.e. the proposed shed, is going to be located. It's in essence directly between the existing structures. So I don't know if, Gemma, you're able to now show the proposed composite plan, and that will show the actual development in place. So in terms of consultation, due to the scale of development proposed, it was not considered appropriate to formally consult any internal or external bodies in respect of this application. So in terms of representation, statutory need by notification was carried out for this application. However, no comments to this were received. In terms of a planning assessment, so planning applications are required to be assessed against a development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. So National Planning Framework 4 or NPF4 was adopted on the 13th of February 2023 by Scottish Ministers. As such, development plan now consists of policies from both our Falkirk Council Local Development Plan 2 and National Planning Framework 4. So in this instance, it's Policy 16 of National Planning Framework 4 and Policy HC08 Residential Extensions and Alterations are relevant in this instance. So the policy assessment for this application can be seen in detail at section 7A of the committee report. In summary, Policy 16 of National Planning Framework 4 states that household development proposals will be supported when they do not have a detrimental impact on the character or environmental quality of the home and the surrounding area in terms of size, design and materials. In this instance, it is not considered that the scale, design and appearance of the structure would be out of keeping with the character of the surrounding area. In addition, the proposal is not considered to have an adverse impact on neighbouring properties in terms of privacy, overshadowing or physical impacts. It is therefore considered that the application complies with the relevant policies. In conclusion, convener, the proposal is considered an acceptable form of development as it complies with Policy 16 of National Planning Framework 4 and Local Plan Policy HC08. There are no material considerations which would warrant the refusal of planning permission. It is thus recommended that Planning Committee grant planning permission for the reasons as outlined in Section 9.1 of the report. Thanks, convener. I'm happy to take any questions the committee might have.
Thank you, sir, for that was a very fulsome report. Thank you. It's an opportunity now for representation made by a deputation request by Councillor McCabe. Would you like to step forward? You know the procedure, Councillor McCabe. You have 10 minutes. Then you stay in your seat unless some members have got questions to ask you once you've read your summary. Thank you, sir. 10 minutes from now.
Thanks, thanks very much, convener. And again, you won't be surprised. I don't have any objection to this application either. This is for a garden shed. It's a hut. This shouldn't come anywhere near planning. And I tell you, had this hut been in my garden, I would need to apply for planning permission. I've already got 2 huts in my garden and I didn't need planning permission for them. This is absolutely ludicrous that this, I've called it in, yeah, but I've called it in for the reason, and again, it falls back to the whole issue of permitted development and what's not. This has to, it's no fault of the officers. There's no any criticism of Ryan. Ryan's had to go through the full planning process for this. There's absolutely no criticism whatsoever. And this is a problem with planning legislation, whatever. Permitted development rights, this should have been a nod, if anything. This lady, I don't know if we could, can somebody call up the, it's actually the site plan, where it actually shows the lady's hut here. And there are 2 existing huts either side of it. It's done and dusted. Why are we even getting involved in this? Now, I don't know. I didn't have time to look up what the fee is for a planning application. Ryan or Ian, I'm sure, will be able to tell us. But that lady probably bought that hut for 300 quid, and she's having to pay another 300 quid to go through the planning process. It's just a nonsense. That's all I'm trying to do with this. I appreciate some people think I'm taking up, wasting people's time. I'm just trying to illustrate. I don't know the forum I can take this in front of to get changes to it. Again, to your good self, convener, highlighting the fact that the Scottish Government are looking at changing, permitted development rights and the planning process, if you like. I think we should be feeding into that, convener, with anything, coming through the experiences that I'm bringing to you. You can go back through the council and be saying to the Scottish Government, we need to be looking at things like this. It's a nonsense,
Dryden, have you got any input in relation to the proposed changes for permitted development within the Scottish Government?
Yes, I think what Councillor McCabe is raising is there is, but that's the concern not for Falkirk Council. Falkirk Council, in its capacity as the planning authority, has to abide and undertake in the statute. Obviously, we have Mr. Moody and colleagues here today who can confirm that, but we have to, as a competent planning authority, and yourselves, you have to have regard to the legislation that's in place at this point in time. And actually, indeed, Ryan's report, you'll see, actually gives an explanation of why it needs planning permission. That you'll see, particularly indeed, I can go back, given my age, that the 1992 order has been amended subsequently. Back in the day, even anything involving a flat required planning permission. Now, you'll see in the Ryan's report, which is comprehensive, explains there have been subsequent changes already through Class 4A, which has now started to understand, from a practical sense, in a Scottish context, that that legislation was maybe too onerous. And the clear aim is, through time, is to gradually try and be more flexible, to try and look at being more efficient in the planning system, and that will continue. So clearly there are plans maybe afoot to look again at permitted development as and when. There are forums where already myself and other officers attend the Knowledge Hub, and also the heads of Planning Scotland have various subgroups, and clearly issues of permitted development are regularly debated, because this is an issue not unique to Falkirk. It happens across the country, and be rest assured, officers are experienced and officers are regularly engaging with fellow colleagues as part of benchmarking. And more importantly, when legislative changes are proposed, there is engagement through certainly planning officers who are dealing with the cases and raising issues at hand, and there will be an engagement. But it is a Scottish legislation, and clearly it has to be applied across all Scotland. But the key thing is that there are certainly moves to look to see if we can further refine some of the legislation, particularly in light of the comments and concerns that you have. Officers do subscribe to that, but at this point in time, we have to abide and we have to undertake and have to have regard to the legislation. And that's what we do, and we have to be consistent. You've already heard the comment of parity, and we have to make sure we're consistent. And it's important from the reputation as Falkirk Council, as a planning authority, that we apply that legislation. And while, yes, I can understand your frustrations, the legislation at the moment is what it is, and we have to abide by that and offer guidance based on that. And that's why we come before you. And I think the key thing here, as you'll see in the report this morning, this explains the reasons why it needs it. That is the legislation, and we have to adopt that. But I do take your point. The point you may wish to consider, you may wish to write personally to the Chief Planner, as you could, if you feel that strongly about it. That is certainly within your gift to do that. But certainly be rest assured that there is ongoing discussions with the planning system, how we can make it more efficient, more flexible where we can. But there is legislation, we have to abide by that legislation.
Okay, now an opportunity, thank you Mr Dryden for that. It's now an opportunity for members to ask any questions Councillor McCabe in relation to his summary. Have we any questions at this stage for Councillor McCabe? None online? No. Okay, Councillor McCabe, thank you once again, sir. If you'd just like to retake your seat.
Quick thank you to Ian. Thank you very much for that, Ian.
Okay, it's up to members now. Councillor Kerr.
Thanks, convener. And I know Brian's trying to make a point, and a lot of time, a lot of what he's brought forward, he's right, but it does affect the applicants who have made the application. And Ian's right. The guidance, as I said, the guidance is there, but it's an individual's interpretation of that guidance, and that applies to every policy that's in the National Planning Framework and LDP2. So it's people's interpretation. But I'm quite happy to support the officer's recommendation, convener.
Yeah, I just want to pick up on a point. You're right to the extent, Councillor Kerr, about guidance. However, it's legislation. I think it's important that certain aspects of planning is it's yes or no. It can be black and white, as you've heard this morning about distances and heights. That is not up for guidance. I think where the legislation says it has to be a certain size or diameter, that is black and white. Where the guidance may come in is when then it's being assessed under planning merits, and there can be a degree of interpretation there. That's understood, but I think the key thing is that it's not all guidance. It is legislation, and there's certain legislation that stipulates a certain parameter, and we have to abide and interpret that. But that is not open to guidance. But it's once we've crossed that decision, whether it is permitted development or not, and if as a member of the planning committee, get an application before you, where normally plan permission is required, then there is sometimes, clearly with the guidance that's out there as a material consideration, that is relevant. So you're right to an extent, but there are certain aspects that it is legislation.
Thanks, Mr. Trine.
Yeah, I was about to make similar comments on the difference between guidance and legislation, but also just to come back and second Councillor Bailey Kerr on the officer's recommendation.
Okay, and Councillor Murtagh?
I was going to say similar, but now I'm having a slight panic attack that I've called you councillor when I should have been calling you Bailey, and I'm completely forgotten. But I would say that I described the same comments that I made in the previous application, but I do have sympathy with what Councillor McCabe has said. And I think that now that we've agreed yesterday in the executive committee to have a seminar and for things to go to scrutiny, perhaps that letter to the chief planner or otherwise could be something that I'm certainly happy to write individually myself on issues which I've got interest on, but it might be something that we can look at if there are things which the council may wish to put forward as well. So thanks, convener. Bailey.
No, thank you. Your points were very, very valid in relation to costs and time, etc. But also we've got to appreciate the views of every single member of this council. Okay, then we've got a motion moved and seconded to agree the recommendation contained within the report. Has members agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Now an opportunity to call back Councillor Bowes. Thank you. I think we'll take a 5-minute comfort break, okay? But that's fuck. Nobody's coming. It's the same time as
It's the legislation.
legislation. It's reconvene. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. We're now reconvening the meeting, and we go straight into item 10, which is construction of agricultural building at land to the south of Doghillock Farm for Mr. David Graham. The report will be coming forward by Catherine Chorley. It's pages 81 to 91, but we have a deputation request. An application has been made by Tish Graham, the applicant, to be received as a deputation, and we also have Councillor McCabe as well. So as members agreed to hear the two deputations?
Agreed.
Agreed to that. Thank you for that. Okay, I think everybody will appreciate that. Thank you very much. Okay, then the report is by our officer, Catherine Chorley. Catherine, thank you.
Thanks, convener. Gemma, if you could put up the photos and scroll through them, please. It should be a PowerPoint presentation that you can just run through.
Catherine, could you maybe put your sound up a bit? It's quite difficult to hear you here.
Thanks, Gemma. I'll move a bit closer, convener. So the applicant submitted an application for a certificate of existing use for the open-sided building shown in the photographs. The site is accessed from a track, which is also shown on the photographs. The application was called in by Councillor McCabe for the reasons set out in paragraph 2.1 of the report. No consultations were carried out and no representations have been received. This application considers the operational development and use of the building. In order to issue a certificate of existing lawful use or development, the development must comply with the requirements of section 151 of the Act, and these are expanded on in the report at 7.1. The onus of proof is on the applicant and the evidence is tested on the balance of probability. The application was accompanied by supporting evidence which is discussed from section 7.4 onwards. The development must have been present and in continuous use for the 4 years preceding the submission of the current application. Evidence needs to be provided to show that the use is operated throughout this period from April 2019 to April 2023 when the application was submitted. The evidence appears to indicate that the building has been present for more than 4 years. The evidence does not, however, indicate that it has been used for agricultural purposes for the 4 years preceding the submission of the application, and on that basis, it would not be possible to certify the building's use. The applicant previously accepted that the use had ceased from at least as far back as November 2022. It is our view that the applicant has not submitted sufficient evidence to confirm the use of the building for agricultural purposes or that it continued to be used for that purpose prior to the submission of the application. Our recommendation is to refuse to issue the certificate as set out in section 10. Thanks, convener. Thanks, Gemma.
Thank you very much for that report. It's an opportunity now for the representations to be made. First of all, we're going to ask Councillor McCabe to step forward. You're well aware of the process, Councillor McCabe. You have 10 minutes and then an opportunity for members to ask any questions if they want to. 10 minutes starting from now, sir. Thank you.
And thanks again, convener. Reason for the calling of this one, there's a couple of reasons actually. when I looked at it, my first question was, why is this down for refusal? It's an existing building. It's been there for some considerable amount of time, and I believe going by the application, it says that the applicant was advised by email on the 15th of December 2022 that either planning permission or a certificate of lawfulness was required for the agricultural shed. Now, the applicant appears to have gone through that process and it's been refused. I suppose what this one actually illustrates is this has already been alluded to by Councillor Kerr in an earlier application where councillors, the process is that we get the weekly list, and on that weekly list there are various applications, various submissions, and there is a recommendation to them under delegated powers. That's the process. Part of the process is that if there are any of concern, we can call them in, the call-in process, and that's exactly what's happened here. Councillor Kerr alluded to it, Councillor Nutter has alluded to it as well. We don't get the detail of the reason for refusal or whatever. It's only when we call it in that we actually get a deeper dive, more information, because there is a planning report has to come once we call it in, and that's when we actually get to find out some of the background to these applications. Now, I know you could say that, well, you could call up the planning officer and go looking for that information. Planning is only one part of a councillor's duty. I don't think any of us have got the time to be calling planning officers up and saying, would you mind running through this planning application for me? I certainly don't, you know. And you might think, here he is, 3-4 applications he's called in today. He's got all the time in the world. I don't. You know, council resources, council time is limited. So there's a wee flaw, again, within the system of locally about the call-in procedures and the amount of information that's available at the time. Now, just moving to this particular application, my concern with it, as I say, is it's existing and it's been in existence. Again, I don't have the real time to get into the detail of it, but it appears to have been in existence since 2014. So by the kind of technicalities of legislation, if you like, if there was an enforcement order in, it's gone out with the time limit for enforcement, but there wasn't an enforcement order in place for this. But the place has been in existence for over 4 years. It appears to me now, just listening to Catherine, that the major element of concern is whether the facility, the asset, has been in continuous agricultural use. I don't know. I mean, I'm unaware of the. I'm aware of the Doghillock farm. I'm not actually aware of this site here, so I don't have any personal knowledge. I've not been to see it. But just having viewed the photographs there, that looks like an agricultural building to me. Whether it's being used for other purposes, I don't know. Is that what the council's case is? No, it's being used for alternative purposes. What other alternative purposes are there? It looks very much like an agricultural building to me. And therefore, I would assume that agricultural building is being used for agricultural purposes. I may be wrong. That may be just my interpretation, but that's really kind of where I'm coming from. Other than that, Convener, I'm just, I suppose, I'm supporting the motion that this should be approved as an agricultural building, given the history of it, given its existence. It's a retrospective application, if you like. And again, is this remind me, is this under permitted development rights? Is it permitted? Or is it a planning application?
I think if I could come in, Convener, through you, just to clarify this point, I think the report is quite explicit about this, but this is not a planning application.
Sorry,
this is not a planning application.
Sorry,
this is a technical determination.
Aye, sorry, and I didn't. I mean, I don't have the agenda up. I couldn't quite see it. So it's a permitted development rights issue again. I'm not going to comment on whether it should be permitted development rights or it should be a full planning application, but just to say, at my look at it, and again, I have not had the greatest amount of time to delve deeper into the background of it, but it appears to have been in existence since 2018 or thereof, and it appears to me at face value to be an agricultural building. I believe the applicants, I'll let them speak for themselves, but they appear to aver that it has been used in continuous agricultural use, and unless something otherwise, I think we have to accept that. That's all I would say. So I'd be happy to support the applicant in their seeking the certificate of lawful use. Okay, thanks, Convener.
McCabe, there will be an opportunity in a minute for members to ask you any questions if they want to, but I'm going to go back to Catherine. Catherine, you've heard what Councillor McCabe has stated in his summary. Is there anything that you would like to add then before we bring in the applicant?
Yeah, it's not specifically a permitted development issue. The applicants are saying that the building has been there and has been in use for agricultural purposes for more than 4 years, and they're looking for a certificate to certify that. The reason the 4 years is important is because that's when this type of building becomes immune from enforcement. So we're accepting that the building has been there for more than 4 years and in that sense is immune from enforcement, but we can't confirm that it has been in agricultural use for that length of time. In fact, the agent had previously accepted that the use had ceased in November 2022. So you have not got that 4-year period of this unauthorised use continuing, and we can't therefore confirm that it's immune from enforcement action in terms of the use. So the reason sort of permitted development rights come into it is because if a building has been constructed without planning permission, it doesn't then obtain permitted development rights. So if you build a house and you haven't got planning permission, you can't then use your permitted development rights to build an extension. But if you get a certificate of existing use, so you're saying that use is now lawful, you then get those permitted development rights. And agricultural buildings have permitted development rights. So what the point of the application is to certify the use and get the permitted development rights associated with it. Does that make sense? It's a bit long-winded and complicated.
Okay, thank you for that. Now there's an opportunity for members to ask any questions of Councillor McCabe in relation to his summary there. Any questions to Councillor McCabe direct, or we send them back to his seat once again? Okay, Councillor McCabe, thank you, sir. Now an opportunity for the application made by Tish Graham to come forward. That's you. Okay, then you have an opportunity for 10 minutes to speak to the committee, and then if you keep your seat, then there'll be an opportunity if members wish to ask you any questions in relation to what you've said. Okay, carry on. Your 10 minutes starts now.
Thank you for allowing me to speak in support of this application today. I would be grateful if you could take into account the fact that we have worked with the planning officer on all aspects of this application. Our application relates to legal confirmation that our shed, as applied for, has been in agricultural use for the last 4 years. We have submitted legal evidence substantiating that the shed was built and used at the date of the submission of our application for more than 4 years. The planning officer's report of handling identifies the requirements of 124 paragraph 2 of the Act, which sets out time limits on enforcement, i.e. physical development such as this becomes immune to enforcement action after 4 years. The planning officer asked us for further evidence of this, and an affidavit was provided and resubmitted with the application to confirm this. It is clear the building has been here for more than 4 years, and this is not disputed by the council. In summary, the agricultural building was completed by April 2028, with all evidence provided in this application submission. We understand that this application should be a legal determination rather than a planning assessment, resting on the evidence submitted, evidenced by our application and affidavit, that our open-sided agricultural building has been in agricultural use for the last 4 years. We are worried that the planning officer's report may lead members into considering planning issues rather than the legal requirements relevant to the primary consideration of the application. And if I could just now go through the report and deal with some of the comments or of the items in the report. In paragraph 3.2, this is an agricultural shed for which we applied some years ago. We applied to find out if prior approval was required for the shed, and the decision of the council was that prior approval was not required. That's because of the size of the shed. Okay, so if we go back to paragraph 3.2, our understanding of the fact that prior approval for the shed, no, that's a bit about moving it. So the point I'd like to make there is that it was a shed that did not need prior approval because of its size. Thank you. Some of these are maybe more relating to the 4 years, but I'll just go through them all anyway. And then move to paragraph 7.4. Our agent has already intimated that stating that the existing class as class 6 was an error. The building has been referred to as a hay barn, but that does not preclude its use for the storing of other agricultural materials or machinery. Storage of hay or straw is not a 365 days a year operation. 7.5, the aerial photographs came from the internet, from Google Earth. We were asked for photographs showing that the shed was in use, but we don't take photographs of the shed on a regular basis. We've taken photographs to show the size of the shed and its location for the purposes of this application, but we don't take photographs to show that it's got straw in it or seed in it or a tractor in it or whatever in it. We don't do that. Paragraph 7.8. The shed was used for parking agricultural machinery before the roof went on it. And we've supplied an affidavit from the chap who does contract farming with us. He's provided a signed affidavit to say that it has been used for agriculture. Miss Chorley said that we had said that use ceased in November 2022. If I could clarify that, we haven't stored straw in it since November 2022. We explained that, if I can go into explaining a bit about agriculture here, in previous years when a grain was combined, the straw that was left was baled, stored and used for bedding and sometimes for feeding of cattle during the winter. Agriculture is now moving towards a more regenerative approach, and rather than use diesel and the machinery to bale the straw, It's often now chopped when it comes through the combine and reincorporated into the ground as fertiliser. So it cuts down the emissions from and the use of diesel, and it benefits the soil. So Richard Fairley was adopting this new regenerative approach, so he wouldn't be using the shed for the storage of straw, and it was the storage of straw that was ceasing in November 22, not the use of the shed for agricultural purposes. I'm sorry if that wasn't made clear at the time. 712. Miss Chorley had some photographs of the site, and you can see that there are machines there. As well as farming, we do a bit of contracting, and that is why these machines are there. Miss Chorley visited the site, now this is from memory, in early June last year, a time of year when there would have been neither hay nor straw in it because it had all been moved on. A visit of part of one day out of a period of 4 years does not give an accurate picture of what the shed is used for. Farming is a seasonal occupation, and most farm buildings, apart from those used for intensive pig and poultry rearing, are empty for part of every year. For paragraph 713, I would just say again, farming is a seasonal occupation, and most farm buildings, apart from those for intensive rearing, are empty for part of every year. The photograph shows 1 day out of 4 years. The Google Earth photographs show, I'd say beyond reasonable doubt, and not just on the balance of probability, that the building was constructed more than 4 years ago. The use of the building for agricultural purposes over that period has been confirmed by Richard Fairley in his affidavit. I have a copy of it if anyone wants to see it. And paragraph 9, now he says that, Richard says that he started contract farming on his own behalf after his father died in January 2018. And in his affidavit, he says, I can confirm that ever since I've carried out contracting work for Davy, and that's from February 2018, this shed has been used for agricultural purposes. Is the use of the land adjacent to the shed of any relevance to the use of the shed? We don't know what we need to do to make the use of the building clear. We have provided everything asked for, apart from photographs, but as I've said, we're not in the habit of taking regular photographs of our sheds. And again, that would only show what was happening on 1 day out of 4 years. If Miss Chorley can, Miss Chorley has said something in paragraph 8.1 about dates which do not match. If she could indicate these dates, we would be happy to clarify the situation.
2 minutes, sorry, you've got 2 minutes left.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Miss Chorley asked at one point for a copy of a contract or an affidavit, and we've provided both. What more can we provide? The test for this is balance of probability, not beyond reasonable doubt. Richard Fairley has confirmed agricultural use. Yes, straw will no longer be stored, but other agricultural material and machinery can be stored. Miss Chorley says in her report the shed appears not to have been used. How does she know this? Has she made further daily visits to the site? Again, the affidavit confirms the use, and again, the test is balance of probability and not beyond reasonable doubt. The recommendation is based on an assumption that the shed has not been used for agricultural purposes. There is no evidence to support this assumption, which is rooted in a failure to understand the seasonal nature of farming. One site visit and 1 or 2 photographs do not prove how it is used. Richard Fairley's affidavit confirms it's agricultural used. If it is not an agricultural shed, what is it? It's an open-sided shed in the middle of the countryside. No other purpose for it.
Thank you very much for your summary. If you just sit there at the moment, I'm going to go back to our officer. Catherine, you've heard what the applicant has stated. There's a number of issues in what she said that I wouldn't say cause concern, but in relation to the fact that she said affidavit by other farmers, in relation to the fact is that how many times did you visit, there's quite a number in there, but you've listened yourself, so if you could maybe summarise yourself the response that's came forward from Trish. Thank you.
Yeah, just going back to the beginning of the report and the site history, there was reference made to a previous application from prior notification. This is where you can build agricultural buildings on agricultural land without needing planning permission, but you still have to submit an application for prior notification. That was improved in 2011, but that was for a different building in a different location. Further along the driveway, so what they built was not in accordance with that approved detail, and that's the building that's in place now is the one that's at issue. In terms of submissions, it was the agent who advised us that the use had ceased prior to the affidavit. This was in a previous application. You know, these are signed documents to confirm that they're correct and accurate. The affidavit was submitted very late and doesn't go into detail about how it's been used since November of last year, when the agent stated that the use had ceased, and the advice was given by the agent that the people who had used the shed were no longer using it for that purpose. And I have been out to site once, and we've received photographs from the agent from a different period when the shed was empty as well. That's it, convener. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. It's an opportunity now for members to ask any questions to the applicant in relation to your summary and what we've just heard from Catherine. Who's Councillor Redmond?
Thanks. That was quite detailed, well done. It was just a few quick questions, like maybe points of clarification. So we're saying it's not going to be used for storing straw going forward. So what and then it's agricultural machinery. Do you think could you maybe go into a wee bit more detail? What machinery do you store in it? Is it used for storing hay bales? At what times of the year is it used for storing hay bales? And then just, I mean, you're right, it does look like an agricultural building. I can't see anything else it could be, but I get Catherine's point, because we'll just get pictures here that show an empty shed and we're not really seeing the use of it. I think if you could maybe just break down in the winter time it's used for storing materials, summer would store hay bales. If you could just do that, that'd be brilliant. Cheers.
Thank you. Richard Fairley is not going to be using it to store straw. But we're still farming, although he does a bit of contract farming for us. We are still farming. We could put straw in it tomorrow. We could put hay in it tomorrow. We could put machinery in it tomorrow. So, you know, it's not in 365-day use. Richard Fairley's not going to be using it for that purpose, but in the springtime he would store seed in it prior to sowing. He would store fertiliser in it prior to spreading. We sometimes have machinery in it, and I have to say that we have got to the stage that we don't know whether we should have anything in it, or it would be better if we didn't have anything in it. And there had been machinery in it prior to Miss Chorley's visit, which my husband removed. But I think the fact is that it's not in 365-day use. It is an agricultural use. Richard Fairley is not going to use it for straw because of his regenerative approach, but he will store seed fertiliser in it. There might be machinery parked in it. The only thing that won't be in it's livestock. So it could be machinery, straw, hay, fertiliser, seed. My kind of main issue is Miss Chorley has taken, literally and metaphorically, a snapshot. She saw one day. I could bring you tomorrow photographs of it in agricultural use.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, Councillor Redmond?
No, I think that's covered it. Thank you.
We've got Councillor Murtagh, then Councillor Kerr. Councillor Murtagh.
Thanks, Convener. I think it's been a really interesting deputation as well. You know, I have some familiarity with farming practice, but it's really interesting in terms of the use of the shed. I suppose one question is probably more for officers in terms of what the legal definitions and where the interpretation lies about continuous. The assessment of what is agricultural use in terms of whether it does have to be continuous over, a period of time or whatever. But I suppose my question to the applicant is, as I understand it, this shed, it's past the 4 years. No, it's not disputed that it's past the 4 years as it's been up, and it's immune from, in effect, the kind of enforcement action of being pulled down, if you like. So my question is about what the reason for the application for the certification for lawful use is. What is your intention in applying for that certification at this time? Because I think the planning officer sort of alluded to, it's more a case of if you have that, then those rights enable you perhaps to have permitted development rights related to the shed to do other things. So my question is just really why you've put this application for the certificate of lawful use in.
It's to clarify its status so that if we did wish to pursue some permitted development in the future, the status of the shed is clarified. And once you go down this road, you want to get to the end of it and show, and not just accept somebody's assumption about it, but make it clear what the shed is used for.
Okay, I suppose it's whether, this is a certificate for lawful use of the existing building that's been there and being used, whether continuously or not, for an extensive period of time that exceeds 4 years. It's not a planning application, as you said, which we are going to consider on the merits of a planning application, nor is it a retrospective planning application either, which we would consider differently. So it's just about that intention for why that certificate of lawful use at this stage is needed. And perhaps the officers could pick up on the kind of legal aspects, maybe not at this point if it's not appropriate in the proceedings, but later in the debate. It would be helpful for me, certainly.
Is the prospective future use relevant to how it's been used in the past? That's what I'm asking about.
We're not. Yeah, we'll get one of the officers to answer that. Okay. Councillor Kerr, then Councillor Nimmo.
Can I ask applicant that the footage that were received and there's no walls on it, is that the way it's always been, and is that the way it'll continue, or is there any plans for?
Well, if I can go back to the beginning of this story, as I said, we applied for permission for an agricultural shed. We asked if we needed prior approval, and we had a plan and a wee drawing of the site of the proposed shed, and we were told that this shed did not need prior approval. And because this shed, if you see on the plan, there was a red outline of the kind of site, and the shed was, let's say, there, because there was a water spring there, and because it was out of line of sight of the house at Dughillock and another house further along, we thought if we moved it but kept it within this area, and it was a shed that didn't need prior approval, so it was moved along there. The original shed was to be a sheeted shed, a fully sheeted general purpose shed, but because of what Richard Fairley was doing, because of the work that we do with Richard Fairley, we decided that we would make it a simpler shed. It's the same size, but it just doesn't have side sheets on it. And at the moment, we have no plans for side sheets.
Thanks very much.
It's the same shed as originally considered, the one that didn't need prior approval. And maybe, obviously we've been wrong. We thought that because it was still within the area of development, it didn't need prior approval, make it simpler and move it to a better position.
Thank you very much. Coming from a rural area in Slamanan, I worked on a lot of farms when I was young, and there's loads of sheds in nearly every farm that didn't get used, and they didn't need to store things in it. Can I just ask Catherine then, if is this an opportunity to ask the officer? So, if the applicant was failed in their attempts to get the certificate of lawful existence, what would happen to the shed?
It's unlikely that we would take enforcement action, but they would not have permitted development rights to carry out any further work to it. And I think they would need to apply for planning permission to use it for any other alternative use.
If I could come in just in addition to what Catherine's correct in what she said, I would also add that it should obviously committee determine today that they support the officer recommendation not to issue certificate of lawfulness, there would be a right of appeal. And that's something that we'll be mindful as well. And that does happen. The applicant would have a right of appeal against the decision. If you decide to take the decision as per the officer recommendation, there would be a right of appeal as well. But Catherine's quite correct in terms of enforcement. Enforcement in this context is a discretionary power, and we have to weigh up all the merits of the case and interests of the wider public interest. So it may not necessarily be the case that we would take enforcement action. We'd have to weigh that up. But again, I just want to clarify as well that should the decision be taken to refuse it today, the applicant would have a right to appeal against that.
And can I say that we would?
So,
Sorry.
so can I just clarify that, Mr. Dryden? And so the only way that the applicant can appeal this is it because it's a certificate of lawfulness?
It would be because the council, if you take the decision today to not or to support the officer recommendation, therefore we would issue or would not issue a certificate of lawfulness to confirm that it is lawful, but there would be a right of appeal against that decision by the applicant to take that, and that would then go to the reporters unit. Right. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
The applicant, once we get into the debate, then they can ask questions there. But at this stage, it's questions to the applicant before he takes her seat. Thank you, sir.
Okay, Councillor Nimmo.
Oh,
questions for the applicant?
Yes, I have a quick question. Yes, we've heard from the applicant that this building was used for the storage of agricultural machinery. Yet when council officers went out and took the photographs, there was nothing in it. The applicant stated in her presentation that all this agricultural machinery was moved by her husband just shortly before the photographs were taken. Can I just ask, where was all this machinery actually moved to? Where was it stored?
It was moved back to the farm.
And stored at the farm?
Yes, but sometimes it's convenient to store machinery at nearer to the site where it's used. So if my husband or Richard Fairley or whoever is working on the fields at Dirkilloch, rather than bring it back to Denevin Mains, the fact that there's a shed there would be used. So it's not sort of long-term storage. It would be while it's being used. But again, that was one day. That was one day that there was nothing in it.
Thanks for that.
The building in question as well, convener, it's not a secure building. So if you're storing anything of value, it's going to be subject to vandalism or whatever, theft. It's not secure.
Well, the reason for moving it from the other, the original plans part of that site was that it would be in the line of sight of the house at Dirkilloch. And the chap there is very good kind of neighbourhood watch. He would keep his eye on it. And there's another house as well. The machinery would possibly be parked outside at Denevin Mains tractors are not always, and machinery is not always locked up.
Okay. Okay, then, have we any more questions to the applicant before we can ask her to retake her seat and we can open the debate? Councillor Bowes.
Convener, I can't hear
Convener,
Councillor Bowes at all.
I can't hear him either, I'm afraid. There's no sound whatsoever.
Is that any better?
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah, right, okay. The beginning of your presentation, you indicated that the building was complete in April 2020. Did I pick that up right?
It was 2018, and we have aerial photographs from Google Earth which show that the roof was on in April 18. And I don't think the council are questioning well, I don't think anyway, they're questioning when it was completed. It's just the agricultural use. Oh, sorry, maybe oh.
Councillor Bowes, can you put the other microphone back on? Sorry.
Is that better?
Yes,
Yeah,
thanks.
that's what.
Right, okay, sorry, dodgy microphones.
Well, sorry if
We've all suffered from them.
Sorry if I read the wrong date. We have struggled over dates during the whole time of this
Okay,
application.
so I just wanted to
Right.
that clarified.
Yeah.
Any further questions to the applicant before we can ask her to retake her seat and open the general debate up?
Hey, Convener, I'd just like to ask it.
Robert?
At 3.3, it says an application was withdrawn on the 16th of December 2022 for the conversion of an agricultural building to form a dwelling house. Was it this agricultural building?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Robert, I don't think there's any more questions. You could retake your seat. Thank you very much.
I'd just like to thank you all.
No, thank you. Okay, then it's an opportunity now for a general debate on this major application. Who would like to come in first? Councillor Bowes.
Thank you. This is going directly to Catherine. It follows up a wee bit what Robert was talking about a second ago. The 2022 application, if this building had a certificate of lawful use at that point, would that have made a significant difference to the application to build a dwelling house there? Because I know if it was just, I know it would, if there were to do just a piece of farmland, that it would be a significant difference. Would this make a significant difference if this is certified?
It would allow us to consider an application. So the reason this came to our attention was because of this 2022 application, where the applicant applied for prior notification to turn the agricultural building into a dwelling. At that time, they said the shed was no longer in use, it was redundant to use, and they wanted to convert it to a dwelling house. We established that the building didn't have planning permission, didn't have a prior notification, so didn't benefit from the permitted development rights that would allow them to make this application. So if a certificate is granted for an agricultural building with an agricultural use in this location, they could then remake that application to convert it to a dwelling house. That application process does have stages to it where you have to consider the impact on various different things, but it's not an assessment against the policies in the local plan. So it's this whole prior notification process again.
Thank you, Kath.
It was a really good question, that. Anybody else like to come in? Councillor Murtagh.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. It was just to kind of ask the officers, whether it's Mr. Madure or Mr. Dryden, in terms of what I was alluding to earlier, from a certificate of lawful use perspective, and for us to determine whether it should be granted, where is the law in terms of the interpretation, the burden of proof? We've heard a lot about the snapshots about, occupation or use in agricultural terms. What are we being asked to kind of measure against? Because, we've heard about affidavits, and there being now current affidavits, whether they were contradicted before or not, the current affidavits that say that this was within continuous agricultural use, but we've got other evidence which suggests that on selected dates it wasn't, for whatever reason. So it's just, what are we being asked to weigh up here legally, and where's interpretation and where's the line of the law?
Thank you. Mr. Dryden.
Yeah, thank you, Convener. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, it's a good point Councillor Murtaugh's raised, but I think you'll see in the report that Catherine has prepared and presented this morning, it's the evidence of what has been provided. What is not up for debate is the structure itself. That is immune. Obviously, it's been there for a period of time. What today here is, you have to consider solely the issue of, has there been sufficient evidence put forward by the applicant to demonstrate that has been used in continual agricultural use over that period of time to render it immune from potential enforcement action. So, as you'll see from the report, and as explained by Catherine in our summary, it is the view of officers that there's not been sufficient evidence put forward to allow us to support in supporting this application for certificate of lawfulness. So really, your remit today is to decide, has there been sufficient evidence put forward? That's been explained in the report by Catherine, and Catherine has summarised that. I'm sure Catherine may want to come in to add any further, given her detailed knowledge of the case, but you really have to focus on the evidence before you. Is that sufficient to allow, obviously, this certificate to be granted? It is the view of officers that there is unfortunately not sufficient evidence.
Catherine, would you like to come in this one?
I've nothing further to add. Thank you, Convener.
That's fine.
Convener.
Hold on a second. Councillor, sorry, we've got Mr. Moody would like to come in at this time. Thank you, Mr.
So I think, just to build on what Mr. Dryden has said already, Convener, maybe just to add that the onus of proof here, so the burden of actually satisfying the planning authority, rests on the applicant. So it's the applicant's job to bring forward the evidence to satisfy you as the planning authority that the criteria that you've been asked to determine have been met here. Now, it's not, in terms of the standard of proof, you don't need to be satisfied beyond reasonable doubt. So that's one thing that's important to stress, and I think that's made clear in the report too. So we're talking about a balance of probabilities here. Is it more likely the case that it's been in continuous agricultural use or not? So ultimately, I think these are questions of just assessing what facts you think are established here and whether those amount to continuous factual use, so that agricultural use. It's not really an issue of planning judgment. It's a factual question which you're being asked to determine as the committee today. And in doing that, what you should be doing is considering the evidence that you have in front of you. So you have evidence laid out within the report in summary form. You've also had a submission directly from the applicant as well, which you can take into account too. So it's balancing these things up, because I think it's fair to say that there is evidence in more than one direction here. So you have the statement from the applicant that it has been in continuous agricultural use, and balancing against that, we've heard from the officers that a statement has been submitted that use ceased in November 2023, which came from the applicants themselves. So I think there's an issue of weighing those two things up here.
Thank you, Mr. Moody. Go back to Councillor Murtagh, then we'll bring in Councillor Kerr. Councillor Murtagh.
Thanks, Convener. That's really helpful from Colin. I suppose still there's a slight question in my mind about what continuous agricultural use means. If, for example, a shed was occupied on a Tuesday, was empty on Wednesday, but was occupied on a Thursday, does that mean there's a break? Because obviously that would then be an interpretation which is unreasonable in some manners, but it would be a break. And I suppose not getting into the debate about, you know, at this stage, it's just in technical terms, can continuous agricultural use include a break, whether it's 1 day, 3 months or otherwise, I think is an important factor for us to understand, because I can see evidence that it hasn't been in continuous agricultural use. But it's, I suppose, the definition of what counts as that. You know, what do we mean? Does it have to be 365 days a year? Because that's important.
Thank you for that. Councillor Kerr.
Yeah, thanks, convener. So we're happy that the building was getting used for agricultural use from 2018. The applicant has provided information from other parties to say that they have used it in the 4 years. Is that correct, Catherine?
We have evidence saying that it was completed in 2018. They have said that it has been used since that time for agricultural purposes. They have also said that the use ceased in November and was surplus to requirements from that point in 2023. Was that your question? Sorry, Councillor Kerr.
That was part of the question. The other question was, they've provided, applicant says they've provided affidavits to say that the building was getting used either by themselves or Mr. Fairley.
Right. So at 7.10 in the report, it covers what's written in the affidavit. So at the end, at the very last part of that paragraph, the affidavit says, I can confirm that since ever I have carried out contracting work for Davy, this shed has been used for agricultural purposes.
Okay.
Is that you, Councillor Kerr?
She's threw me off with the questions, but if I may indulge, if it comes back to, if you may indulge.
Councillor Sinclair.
Thanks, convener. I suppose my issues here are based kind of on what Councillor Murtagh was saying about continuous use. I think part of what was presented to us, it became clear that for significant periods of a year, the building is empty, or where that would be concerned for me would be that the building is then not in use. I think at that point it becomes a question of whether we surmise that it's the case that it's been used for agricultural use continuously from that point in time to the point in time in which it ceased, or whether we're satisfied that the facts show that. And I have to be completely honest here and say I don't think the facts for me that satisfies that. And it's not a case of questioning whether or not what we're hearing is correct. I absolutely believe that it may have been, and it will have been in use for that period of time. What's not presented to me is the facts to state that it has been. And we're dealing with factual information here rather than surmising that is the case based on the information that's presented to us. And yeah, I suppose that's where my concerns lie. I wonder if it can be explained perhaps more clearly as to what agricultural use would mean, and whether there could be an interpretation as to whether we've seen photographs that would suggest that there's industrial equipment here, not agricultural equipment. Would they be considered as agricultural machinery? What kind of machinery are we talking about? Is there a crossover or a grey area as to where agricultural and industrial merge, or is that would there be a determination of what is agricultural use? I suppose that's what I would ask.
Okay. Yeah, Mr. Dryden.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. I think Councillor raised a few points. I would just say, as Mr. Reid said, the onus is on the applicant to provide that evidence. But I'll ask Catherine to come back in, because clearly she has been, obviously, as part of this assessment, carefully assessing and asking for information. So, Catherine, do you want to come back in?
Yeah, I mean, the report contains all the information that was submitted to us. In terms of agricultural uses, for me personally, I think what sits around the site goes beyond what would be an agricultural use. The applicant, the agent, have accepted that these machinery and materials are linked with a quarry that has been historically worked in the area. But what complicates it slightly is that the application is, the red line boundary for the application site is only the building and not the area around it. So I don't know if Ian, whether you want to add anything to that.
No, I think that covers it clearly, Kath. I think this is down to, again, the point of the evidence that you have before you today. Is that sufficient to allow you as a committee to decide, has it been used in continuous agricultural use?
Convener, I stand in that case. I stand by the concerns that I have. That I don't think, for me personally, the body of evidence that's provided meets that criteria. I mean, it doesn't meet, for me. It doesn't set it out clearly, and I still have there's so many gaps that I think have not been answered with this. And in that case, reluctantly, I would move to move the Office of Recommendations in the report, sir.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Redmond.
Thanks. Kind of along the same lines as Councillor Sinclair, but not quite. I would disagree with his motion slightly. I just think when the applicant was speaking, they said we could provide photographs of this in agricultural use tomorrow, and I'm not really sure why that's maybe not been done so far, but I would maybe move that we go to a continuation to allow photographs to come forward. I would also like a kind of wrote out timetable of use by seasons by the applicant. It might be better if the farmer himself maybe does that, because he'll know exactly how the building's used, but I think we should continue it and allow for some information to come forward, because I don't think it should be hard to get the photographs, to be honest. I don't know why it's not been done.
Okay, so just to clarify where we are, I've got a motion by Councillor Sinclair to agree with recommendations contained within the report, which is to refuse. We've got an amendment, obviously, for Councillor Redmond for a continuation. We'll go to Councillor Bowes then I keep calling you General. Who's there? Oh, Councillor Murtagh as well, okay. Councillor Bowes.
Again, also been known to be a gentleman, I'll defer to Councillor Murtagh.
Councillor Murtagh.
Goodness me, it's too much.
I know.
What's going on? Yeah, but Councillor Nimmo said that was number one. So I've noted Councillor Nimmo's comments were preferable. No, I am reluctantly, I would say I would second Councillor Sinclair, not reluctantly from the point of view of seconding Councillor Sinclair, but because I think it's a really complicated situation, and I think what's difficult here is the satisfaction of the legal criteria and the burden of proof. And I think that there is significant ambiguity that means that I can't be confident that on the legal aspect of the continuous agricultural use, it's not been demonstrated. And on purely on that point, I think that's where I would second. And I think that the point, what Councillor Redmond was saying in terms of looking at a timeline, and I think the difficulty in that is that if we have had a statement that has said that at a certain point it's ceased, regardless of what may happen now, you could take 4 years continuous evidence from now, that might demonstrate that in 4 years' time. But I think the difficulty is that there is not a burden of proof as is needed to be supplied now, by the applicant. And I think I take sympathy with the applicant that what proof is required, what would satisfy that. And I'm not making the policy or the law, so I don't know and have sympathy with that. But all I can say is that from the point of view of what we're being asked to do, and the judge on, it's not been demonstrated to me that would be an appropriate decision to go against the officer's recommendations. So I have a great deal of sympathy with the deputation. I think it's regrettable that the situation is here, but I can't see any other option for me as a councillor in the decision-making framework here.
Thank you. Just to clarify before we go to Councillor Bowes, we have a motion moved by Councillor Sinclair to agree the recommendation came in the report was to refuse, and seconded by Councillor Murtagh. We have an amendment brought forward by Councillor Redmond to go for a continuation. We're now going to Councillor Bowes.
Thank you, Convener. Hopefully these can hear this one. Is this any better? Excellent, thank you. Sorry, Catherine, I'm coming to you again. So item 713, and particularly the last two sentences in it, included in the submissions within the statement from the agent advising the building had become redundant to requirements. Photos provided with this application showed the building was not in use. I'm assuming then that the 2022 application, the agent for the applicant was confirming at that point that the building was not redundant. So was this redundant to requirements, I think is the actual wording, or I'm assuming that by that the interpretation of that would be it's not in use because there's photographs presented to show that as well. Am I right in reading that properly?
That was the intention of what I was saying in the report. That's, yeah, that they had previously said in that application that the building was no longer required for that purpose.
Thank you, because that's obviously that's evidence that you're taking from a previous submission that was put in there, and with that I'm actually quite comfortable to go with the officer's recommendations.
Thank you for that. It's now an opportunity for Councillor Nimmo, then Councillor Kerr.
Thanks, Convener. Just 2 or 3 points. I'm quite happy to support the officer's position in relation to this application. It was requested that we get further photographs. Now, as far as I'm concerned, if we're getting further photographs, there's a big danger that it'll be staged. And I'll be very surprised if this building isn't full of machinery and agricultural things in the next lot of photographs. I don't really see any merit in that whatsoever. This application is obviously for a certificate of lawful use, but I have concerns regarding what's going to happen here in the future. Does Falkirk Council currently have any outstanding planning applications in relation to this plot of land? Is that a relevant question? Can I get an answer to that?
It's a relevant question. Catherine?
We don't have any outstanding planning applications for that particular site, no. Just
Okay.
what's described in the site history in the report.
Thanks for that, Catherine. Thanks, Convener. That's me finished.
Councillor Kerr, then Councillor Forrest. Bailey, sorry, Bailey.
Can I ask, Convener, it was stated by the applicant that Catherine had been on site once. Is that correct?
Yep, through you, Convener. I attended the site once on an unannounced site visit.
Over 4 years?
No, since these applications have come in.
All right, okay.
Okay.
Thanks, Convener.
Councillor Forrest, we've got to you at last.
Thank you. I switched off my mic to save the batteries just in case it started playing up again. Exactly what constitutes evidence, because, you know, a lot of the summers I spent on a farm, and many of the buildings were multi-use. We used to jump off the hay stacks and whatnot. Then we got really fed up when someone came and drove a digger into the barn to store it there. And I think the majority of the pictures that were actually taken at that time were of me and my siblings playing in it. Nobody took pictures to say, oh, sometime in the future I might need this. And that's where my sympathies lie with this. Could invoices, receipts, etc. from Richard Fairley act as evidence that it was being used for agricultural use, if that was on this thing?
I think Mr. Fairley's already gave an affidavit. Catherine, do you want to just clarify exactly the affidavit that was given by Mr. Fairley in relation to the application?
Yeah, so that came in quite late in the process, but it's discussed at 7.9 and 7.10. I mean, it's a signed affidavit, so it carries a certain amount of weight in that respect. But you know, we keep going back to the previous application, which was also a signed application by the agent, and it's that balance between what you give that weight to. In terms of evidence, yes, invoices, anything which shows that the building was in use and that use continued up until the date of this application for a certificate of existing use.
Thanks. Therefore, if there was an invoice to show that Mr. Fairley had paid for the building to be used as for agricultural use, then that should be evidence in itself.
Mr. Dryden, you want to come in on that one?
I'll probably defer back to Catherine. I can explain, but what I would say it's the onus is on the applicant to provide all the evidence and all what you discussed. And that's the point. Officers are in balance. I understand. Are of the view that there's not been sufficient evidence put before us to demonstrate continuous use. Hence, our recommendation is not to support the application for certificate of lawfulness.
Thank you. I understand that. I understand that there is a shortage of evidence. I am looking on it in the viewpoint that a lot of the talk here has been about photographs. Photographs are not, put it this way, you do, if a farmer has got time to spend taking photographs of stuff being stored in a shed, then he's probably missing out on something else on the farm to be done. And I've got great sympathy. Obviously, where we're talking about photographic evidence, and that is why I'm asking about invoices, etc. If something like that could also be used to help this lady's case.
Yeah, I think indeed that is the case. It's not just photographic evidence. You will see from the report before you, as outlined by Catherine, a lot of other evidence was considered, but as the view of officers, that evidence is still falls short at this point in time of the assessment of this application for certificate of lawfulness.
Okay. Deputy Convener.
I think the important part, I believe it was used for agricultural purposes. Understand that hay and straw is stored in the winter and used throughout, or stored in the summer and used throughout the winter. But I think the important part was that Councillor Bowes raised was 713, where the agent has said it's not been used, and that's been for over a year. So I can't see that we could actually accept that it's been in constant use up to date.
Thank you for your input, sir.
Thanks, Convener.
Sorry, Provost.
My apologies.
It's Councillor Kerr been waiting for some time, so it's Councillor Kerr and then Provost.
Thanks. Probably known for Councillor Forrest, Convener. I'm satisfied that there is proof. I understand where Deputy Convener Kelly and Councillor Bowes mentioned about the 2002 for the 2022, sorry, for the application, but consequent for that, Mr. Fairley came in 2023. So it's a saying, he's saying it wasn't, but he says it is. And I'm quite happy that there was continuous for the period. So I'll put an amendment in to say that I support the application, the lawful certificateness.
Okay, just to clarify Mr. Moody in relation to a further amendment. We've already got amendment from, but it's not been seconded. We've got amendment with an amendment from Councillor Redmond for a continuation. Is there anybody at this stage would like to second that? Nope. So then we've got Councillor Kerr's further amendment in relation to which your full amendment, sir? Amendment.
Use of the land for the period of time specified. So did you get that?
Yep. Have we got a seconder for the further amendment? Councillor Flynn.
Yep, thank you, convener. I'd be happy to second Councillor Kerr's amendment, and I would say as well, I do have over the last 15 years contact with a local farmer, not close to me, but in the general area, and I do recognise that hay barns, sheds, and all the rest of it are very, very seasonal, and you can have times when they're empty, and you could actually say to someone they're not being used because they're not physically used at that point in time. And then obviously when hay gets harvested, is stored, and not all hay is used on the particular farm, a lot of it is sold on. So I'm confident from my perspective that, you know, that this has been used continuously, but not necessarily the shed full all the time, but continuously used over the period mentioned. So I don't have any hesitation in saying we should grant the certificate of lawful use. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So just let's go back and clarify the situation. We have a motion moved and seconded to agree the recommendations contained within the report, which is to refuse. We now have a further amendment from Councillor Kerr, seconded by Councillor Flynn, to agree to grant. Anybody else like to come in at this stage? Nope. Mr. Moody.
Yes, thank you, convener. And as you've just summarised, we have a motion from Councillor Sinclair, seconded by Councillor Murtagh, in the terms of the recommendations within the report, which is to refuse to issue the certificate, against which there is an amendment moved by Bailey Kerr and seconded by Councillor Flynn, which is on the basis of being satisfied that there is sufficient evidence of continuous agricultural use to issue the certificate. Provost Bissett.
Motion.
Councillor Bowes.
Motion.
Bailey Buchanan.
Amendment.
Councillor Colley.
Amendment.
Councillor Flynn.
Amendment.
Councillor Forrest.
Motion.
Councillor Kelly.
Motion.
Bailey Kerr.
Amendment.
Councillor Murtagh.
Motion.
Councillor Nimmo.
Motion.
Councillor Redmond.
Motion.
And Councillor Sinclair.
Motion.
Convener, there are 8 votes for the motion. There are 4 votes for the amendment. The motion carries.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we'll just have another. I know that some people are looking for a comfort break, so we'll have another 5-minute comfort break before we go on to the last item on the agenda. So 5 minutes. Thank you. See the end of the. I know I was. See the issue is. Okay, everybody, we'll reconvene this morning's meeting. We're going into the last item on the agenda, which is item 11. It's an extension to dwelling house at 6 McGowan Crescent, Larbert, for Mr. Michael Jacobs. The report is by Catherine Chorley, and believe it or not, we have an application coming forward to represent and by Councillor McCabe. So are we agreed to allow Councillor McCabe?
Agreed.
No, we
going to say no, but okay.
Okay, fine.
Agreed.
Okay, fine. Okay then, Catherine.
Thanks, convener. I'll shoot through this one. It's a small extension and a certificate of proposed lawful development this time. Gemma, please could you show the composite plan, if you wouldn't mind? As I said, the application is for a single-storey extension to the rear of the property. The report includes a description of the site. It's a detached dwelling house. The application was called in by Councillor McCabe for the reasons set out in 2.1 of the report. As the application is for a certificate, there's no consultations and no representations were received. It's our view that the proposal complies with the limits on permitted development and the assessment is contained in section 7. Our recommendation is to issue the certificate as set out in section 10. That's it from me, convener. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Now an opportunity for Councillor McCabe to come forward. Councillor McCabe, you have 10 minutes and then an opportunity to just sit there in case any members of the committee have questions. You have 10 minutes starting from now. Thank you, sir. You want to put your button on? Thank you.
I've never done this before. Thank you, convener, again. Reason for calling, it's certificate of lawfulness, proposed use or development. It's contained within the report that had been a previous application, which I also called in. And the reason I'd called that one in, it was a certificate of lawful use, which was actually proposed for refusal. I called it in, I didn't see anything matter with the submission, and I felt it should have been approved. In some iteration of that submission, the original application was then withdrawn. We then had a further application submitted, this one here. So again, that piqued my interest. It's for permitted development rights, again, and I had a good look at the drawings and I could see absolutely no difference at all in the drawings. In fact, the only difference that I could see I actually couldn't see any difference. But reading through the report here, which again, the original application I felt should have been approved. I'd called it in because it was up for refusal. This one is up for approval, but I called it in to find out what the changes are, what the differences are, because I don't see them. It says in the report at 1.2, an amending plan which updates a slight angle at which the property sits. What does that actually mean? I can't see that in the drawing. Paragraph 3.1, the previous application for a slightly larger extension. Again, I don't see that in the amended drawings. And it begs me to ask the question, how big was the original extension? Because I don't think it was that big enough anyway to have been minded for refusal in the first submission for the certificate of lawful use. this kind of falls in with almost the theme of the applications that I brought forward today, where permitted development rights, they should be the way forward. We shouldn't have to come here. We shouldn't have to bring things in front of the planning committee. We shouldn't have to bring these things. These should be almost done just on the nod, because it meets the criteria. This met the criteria in the first submission. It meets it in the second submission. And without labouring the point, it appears that we're now aware of some of the concerns that I have, and we now perhaps have a forum where we can develop how permitted development is applied and is carried out, and it makes the best use of our very stretched resources. If I could just pick up on one wee point that was made in kind of earlier submissions, and it was to do, I think Mr. Dryden alluded to it, where the council has introduced charges. If you want to speak to a planning officer, because we're stretched for cash, we're now looking to have any applicant have a pre-submission meeting with council officers. I think I'd suggested it yesterday at the executive. We should be looking at maybe pulling that back, because the perfect example was the one that I said, the garden shed, where we charged the lady 300 quid for a planning application, and and she had engaged beforehand, we would maybe have charged her 60 to 180 quid just to speak to an officer. She should have been able to get in touch with the planning department and say, do I need this, do I need that, and whatever, and just be given some kind of guidance. I'm not asking for a determination to be made there and then, but just be given some kind of general guidance that this is the process you need to follow. And because, again, as Mr. Dryden alluded to, I mean, I called in 8 applications, and 4 of them, at the list stage, 4 of them were withdrawn. I mentioned this yesterday at the executive. That shouldn't be happening. There's something wrong, But again, going back to what you opened with, the convener, you're aware, and Mr. Dryden's added to it, we're aware that the Scottish Government is looking into moving on and trying to kind of hone in and cut out some of the wee anomalies that are leading into things like this. So again, just to close on this one, I've no objection to. I think it should have been approved. It should have been approved the first time round. I'm happy to support.
Okay, thank you for your input there, sir. Catherine, I'm going to go straight to you. There are a couple of questions that was in the summary by Councillor McCabe in relation to what the main one was. What's different now? So if you could maybe expand on that for everybody. Thank you.
Yeah, sure, convener. Gemma, would you mind showing that plan again, please, and I can talk you through it. I don't have the previous plan because obviously that's not the application under consideration, but I can talk you through it. If you look at the rear elevation and the side elevation, you can see that they are 3 meters high and 2.9 meters to the eaves. So that's the current application. The previous application was 3.3 meters high and over 3 meters at the eaves. And the important measurement here is that you can't exceed 3 meters to the eaves height. So the previous application exceeded that. This new application has it dropped down to 2.9. So the full extension sits lower. Previously it sat just under the windowsill at first floor level. It's been dropped down. So that brings it, in our view, within the terms of permitted development.
Okay, fine. Thanks for that one. I'm going to open up now to members, first of all, asking direct questions to Councillor McCabe. No, nothing to officers at the moment, but direct. Anybody get any direct questions to Councillor McCabe?
If I may just come from one
You
point.
come in, yes.
Just obviously, I think Catherine's quite rightly covered the aspects, which is important, but I just want to just pick up on the points that Councillor McCabe made about obviously the charging, and obviously that decision was taken. As I said, I don't want to go back over it too much, but I did explain earlier now, say that we didn't take that lightly. I think certainly we have reluctantly found ourselves to go into that position, like all planning authorities have, but we were certainly one of the few remaining authorities until earlier this year who did not actually take charging. But I would just want to reiterate that there is extensive advice and guidance on our web pages for the situation that Councillor McCabe's raised. We also signpost not only our own web page, but within that web page is also the Scottish Government guidance, which you can find is easily accessible. And while it's something we don't take lightly, that there is advice there that we would encourage potentially people approaching us to go and have a look at in the first instance. Thank you.
Members, is there any direct questions to Councillor McCabe at this stage? I'm looking on. Councillor Nimmo, direct question to Councillor McCabe.
Convener, it's not actually a question, but it's in relation to what Mr McCabe was talking about. It's in relation to the charging aspect.
Well,
and Mr Dryden's obviously covered that.
Sorry, Councillor Nimmo, what we'll do is we'll bring that in the general debate because I've got questions on that issue as well. But it's any direct questions to Councillor McCabe in relation to his summary? None? Okay, Councillor McCabe, you can retake your seat. Thank you.
I'd just like to express my thanks to everyone on the committee. You'll fully appreciate why I've brought the 4 items to date. I think we are moving on. And just if I've spoken to Mr Moody earlier on, I don't see this actually happening again. I don't see I will have the need to have call-ins to illustrate faults in the system. So just to thank you once again for your time. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
No, thank you for your presentations over the past few months on this issue. You're an elected member and you have got an opportunity to bring forward areas of concern. It doesn't matter what committee you're on. Well done. Thank you. Okay, then I'm going to open it up for general debate. Councillor Nimmo, I'm coming straight back to you.
Okay, thanks very much, Provost, and I'll be quick. As I said, just in relation to the charging issue that Councillor McCabe raised there, and Mr Dryden also commented on it, I think my view is quite well known. Planning departments, there is an argument for them to be self-sustaining and self-financing, and I think that's the future. We should be putting the financial burden on developers, and that'll be the way forward as well, in my opinion. I'm happy to take on board anybody else's comments in relation to that as well.
Okay, thank you for that. Members, we're in debate now in relation to this application. Councillor Bowes.
Thank you, Convener. Keep this one relatively simple. It complies with the permitted development, and therefore I'm going to put forward the recommendations as per the council officers and the planning officers. I will add one wee thing though, for anything to do with the fees is actually a decision of council at budgetary time rather than for the planning committee itself.
Yep.
So if somebody wants to bring that up at the budget, then that's absolutely fine.
Okay, thank you. So you're formally moving. Fine. Councillor Sinclair.
Yeah, I'm content to second Councillor Bowes.
Okay, we've got a motion moved and seconded. Is there anybody otherwise minded? No. Agreed. Thank you very much. That brings us to the end, and thank you very much. It's been a very worthwhile meeting this morning. What a good debate, and could I take this opportunity to wish you all a very happy 2024.
Thanks, Convener.
Happy New Year.